I wasn't going to do the Miami Heat season preview right now because they're in the mix to acquire every single superstar in the NBA by trade, and you just never know when it might get pulled off. Speaking of, I don't know how to do this one, but Michael Bolton pulling off. Let's go.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it. Indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NBA fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd, and what do you do for a living and how much money do you make? I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always, at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Cool. Yep, no, that's it. I thought there was more. Thank you also for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free. We are available on all platforms, so double bang it. Hit a thumb and leave a comment down below. All right. Locked On Fantasy Basketball Bowl. Still waiting on people to accept invites. So still put your applications in, because if they don't accept those invites really soon, they're getting booted. And then you will get in. And I've still got that list of about 900 applications, I think, at the moment. And I can easily, look, once I sort out these first 722 teams for categories and first 360 teams for points leagues, I can easily just expand that out. And I probably will. I just want to get those first batches locked in. So don't be afraid of putting more application, or putting an application if you haven't done it and think you're going to miss it. You haven't. I can expand these out. There is a limit to how far I go. It's probably like 840 or 900 for categories. And it would be the same for points, but I'm not getting 900 people for points. I know that. And then also stay tuned. We might do a draft and hold type series as well. Still undecided on that. But that's where we're at with the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Bowl. But we are here now to talk about the Miami Heat for this upcoming season and look at their fantasy values and where all the projected ideas sit around this team. And let's look at their projected starting five for the second consecutive offseason. There might actually be more than the second consecutive offseason. This team did absolutely nothing in free agency. They did nothing in terms of trades, unless you're a massive Alec Burks guy. They did nothing. Shout out to the Lakers as well. Just a drive-by for them. This is my projected starting five for Miami. It's Tyler Hero and Terry Rozier in the backcourt. Whoever you think is the point guard, it doesn't really matter. They're both going to sort of handle that role. Jim Butler, General Soreness himself at the 3. I do think that little Chungus Nikola Jovic will start at the 4 and Bam Adebayo at the 5. Now, this would seem outrageous to suggest in most situations, but I'm not going to rule out that they do have Bam Adebayo moving to the 4 and Khalil Ware starting at the 5. I'm not going to rule that out. I don't think they would do that, but I feel very confident that Ware is a better player/prospect than Jovic and Highsmith. The other option Highsmith's the other option they could have at the 4, but he's like 6'5". At least Jovic is big. I wouldn't be shocked if we get some Ware Adebayo lineups. Don't think they'll start that way, but it's not something that I'm going to rule out. But I think at the moment, the easy play with Miami is Hero, Rozier, Butler, Jovic, and Bam Adebayo. I think that is how they will start the season out with their starting group. This is also a team that, because they just did absolutely nothing in the offseason, realistically, that when we talk about their fantasy value and who's overvalued and undervalued, and that's a lot of the times where value comes from, is like not adjusting to changes. No changes really happened here. So there's not a lot that actually stands out as a big opportunity. The one that does appear to me to be an undervalued player, and you will hear me a lot criticize Jim Butler. I put out a tweet yesterday saying, I even talked about it on a podcast, saying about, hey, who's the guy that you think is a Josh Lloyd type of player? And I'll be honest with you, I put that out there as not a vanity thing, but like a way to also to prove to myself that I'm still on the right track with what I do. Because the fact that the answers to those tweets and comments were so wildly different suggests to me that I do try and evaluate all players fairly. There'll be some that tell you that I hate empty stat chuckers in the next comment, someone will say, yeah, you really like Jordan Poole, though. A different person will say that. Or they'll say, you really love the players with high percentages. And then someone will say, yeah, you go after the high usage, low efficiency players. All right, so the idea that you might think that you've pinned down the type of player that is my type of player, and someone pins down the exact opposite, to me was, again, partly just to keep myself on track. It felt good. And there were people who come out and said, look, yeah, you really love the Jimmy Butler type players. Now, I don't know if that was sarcastic, but I did used to really love what Jimmy Butler brought. He annoys the absolute shit out of me at the moment. But I still understand where his fantasy value is. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pontificate. That's a great word. I'm not going to sit here and tell you, well, Jimmy Butler's actually a top 20 player. He's going to bounce back. He's going to have motivation now to get his contract. So he's going to actually decide to play and try in the regular season. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that because I don't believe that is true. And there are many reasons why Jimmy Butler had a poor season last season. I have banged on about Jimmy Butler for 4 years, saying the bro gets hurt in March and February almost every year. His body cannot hold up to this. I've also said for years and years at a time that, hey, you know what happens when a player relies heavily on steal numbers? Well, you're going to have a year where the steal numbers aren't there. And that's exactly what happened to James here. Butler's numbers fell away. Jim is 35 now. He had only 23 usage. He averaged 21 points still. He hit a 3. 5 rebounds and 5 assists, but 1.3 steals. But when you're rolling at 1.9, and we make this point all the time, 1.3 is good. It's above average. But it's like if Luka Doncic became a 24-point-per-game scorer. You'd say, well, he's still actually scoring above average. It's totally fine. Yeah, but that's not why you have him. That's not why you picked him. That's not why you drafted him. And steals are the one that go up and down like that. He shot 50 and 86 from the line. His free throw percentage is good, but the attempts overall drop. But the thing that, I talk about Jimmy, whether you want to get in his head and say, well, now he's motivated. Again, I will always throw this part out there. Do you know when Jimmy Butler was eligible for a contract extension? Is literally right now. So last season was a contract year for him as well. And what happened in that one? Well, that's what happened. He was bad. He had one of his worst seasons in recent memory in a contract year. So is it the shock of not succeeding in the first contract year going to make him perform better in the second contract year? Or is he busted up from years of playing under Tom Thibodeau when he's 35 years of age? I don't know. I don't know which one of those. I do actually, but I'm not sure which one of those is true. I actually do. So back to that. That all sounds really negative about me talking about Jim Butler. But ESPN said, right, Josh, we see that you don't like Jim Butler. We hate him more. I go, okay, sweet. Now value appears. Jimmy Butler's ADP on ESPN is 59. His ranking, the recently updated Category League rankings on ESPN, has Jimmy at 79. And while I would not consider Jimmy Butler in round 1, or round 2, even if a Roto League, or round 3, maybe end of round 3 for Roto, maybe, I would look at him at middle of round 4, and I bloody sure would look at him in round 8, 7, where that ADP sits, or that rank sits, 79, 100%. Of course I would. The most obvious decision of all time to look at Jimmy Butler at that spot and go, yeah, I'll take him there. Now, I don't have faith in his body holding up at all. I don't have faith in him becoming a three-point shooter or usage ramping back up or the steals actually being consistent. I don't. But when we get to that position, then we're absolutely laughing. He's ranked at the ADP of 50 on Yahoo. That's about bang on to me. Everything else is about bang on. That one is providing some nice little numbers for us. I will, let's just go straight into overvalued players on this Heat team in terms of where their fantasy value lies. And this one is a relatively quick segment because nobody for the majority of leagues looks to me to be overrated. I thought there was a risk that some sites or ADPs would put Jaime Jaquez too high. But if you're sitting outside the top 120 in ranks or ADP, and 65% or 70% of leagues are 12-team leagues, which is what I've got to sort of generate most of the content for, then if you're sitting at 140 ranking, then you're not too high. You're totally okay in that area. Thought there was a risk that Terry Rozier might go too high. Absolutely not. He's in the right spot as well. So I don't think anybody on this Heat team currently, which is wild for this Miami Heat team, which is glazed more than a Krispy Kreme, that no one is overvalued. W to the rankers. Rankers with an R. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The NFL season is here, and you can start your NFL season if you play, but also if you watch and you want to place bets on it, with a big return. Well, actually, if you play, don't get a big return on FanDuel because you will get busted, caught, kicked out of the league. Don't do that. But if you want to have a big return on FanDuel and don't play in the league, FanDuel could do it. America's #1 sportsbook. That's a great start. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can log onto the app, you can see the bets there, but you look at the stats, the play-by-play, what's happening, what's the recent in-game things you can take a squiz at. You squiz at it, you place your bets, and bang. And if you are a new customer, all new customers, if you place a $5 bet, it doesn't have to win. You just got to place a $5 bet, and you get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. So go to FanDuel.com right now and get started, and don't forget to gamble responsibly. Cool, sick ad, that one. I really did well, didn't I? I really dominated that one. Killed it. We have got a revamped Locked On NBA show coming for you soon. I think it's relaunching. Just got the news now. I don't even know if I'm supposed to say it, but here you go. It's a revamped Locked On NBA. I'm not going to give you the details of it yet because I just read them and forgot them. But I know that we are changing the Locked On NBA show, so be aware that that will relaunch soon. New format, new system, all that. Locked On NBA, it's coming. Apologies to all of my bosses if I revealed something I shouldn't have. Let's go back now. We looked at overvalued. We looked at undervalued. That list was very empty, very clearly. What else are we going to look at? Let's look at breakout candidates. And I do think on this team that we do have a couple of interesting names here. One of them I project to start, and that's Little Chungus, Nikola Jovic. The other one is Jaime Jaquez. Now, I didn't mention Jaquez before when I was talking about options to start, because I just don't think they will. He's a 3. Realistically, he's a 3, Jaquez. You could, I guess, make an argument that Jim Butler can be a permanent 4. He doesn't move as well as he used to, doesn't shoot that well. I think he might be just a little bit undersized if you're going to run Hero, Rozier, Jaquez, and Butler, and I don't think that's going to work. But what we do know about Jaquez, there are 2 things that we know. Actually, I'll get to Jovic in a second because I've just started talking about Jaquez now. So we'll get to Jovic in a second. What was I going to talk about? Completely lost what I was talking about. Anyway, no, that's fine. We're going to talk about Jaquez right now, as I completely lose what I'm doing. No, that's it. We've got it. We know 2 things about Jaime. Is that when there's the opportunity with 1 to 2 players out of the Heat rotation, he will do more. We also know that he was incredibly overrated. This is a man that many people were out here telling us should have gone top 3 in the draft, could challenge for Rookie of the Year, all-rookie first-team legend who averaged 12 points, under 4 rebounds, and 2.6 assists. Like, they're totally fine numbers. And the argument people who did that on a good team. Was it a good team? The answer to that is no as well. It was a middling team, and he did really well, shot over his head when the opportunity. He did the perfect thing, is, hey, more minutes, more usage, and you shoot well above expectations. So it makes you look way better than you are. I'm not saying that he's bad at all. And my constant thing about Jaquez has been he's an older prospect who's going to make a really strong, a really, really good role player. That might be a starter at some point. I don't know, but he's a really good role player. And I think we saw that calm back down. But it is year 2 for Jaquez now. And Butler is winding down, and I was told that there was a significant chance that Jim would request a trade in the offseason. That has not happened, but there were definitely discussions around it. And when that happens, and when Butler is gone, which almost certainly will be next season, Jaquez will start, and he will be better. He's going to have iffy percentages. His steal numbers are solid. His passing is all right. There is room for growth. I don't ever see him becoming a star, but I do think that he will have consistent enough top 100 seasons for a small period of time. But there is that chance that in year 2 here that they do decide that, okay, well, Butler is going to, either Butler gets hurt long term, or they go differently and play Butler at the 4, or they split up the backcourt, and Jaquez is that good that he starts. I don't think that he is. I don't even think he's the best prospect on this team. But there is possibilities of that happening, so I am putting him on breakout watch. The other guy that we've got on breakout watch is the guy that I think is going to start at power forward, who is another player that I'm just haven't been a large fan of him as a prospect, and that's Nikola Jovic. Now, Jovic has the advantage of a Jaquez in that he's only 21. He's 6'10", and he plays the 4, and he started the second half of last season. He played 19 minutes a night. He averaged 8 and 4. 0.3 blocks is a pretty low number. He shot 45 and 70. They're pretty bad numbers. Overall, his fantasy profile is not unbelievably strong. He shoots threes at a decent enough volume and rate, but field goals, free throws, steals, and blocks are all below average. He's a very good passer for his position and for his height. That is true. There's still not huge volume. But I can see the 19 minutes from Jovic pushing into 25 this season and at least moving into like 14-team discussions. Maybe at the fringes of 12s. And he will at least have moments, I think, this season, Jovic, of being a some sort of 12-team stream option. I think there is a possibility we get to that. I'm not going to be super excited, but he's a third-year player. Jaquez is a second-year player. They strike me as the best likelihood chances to break out. The opportunity is there. You can see how it happens. Jaquez probably relies a little bit more on injury, whereas Jovic is almost definitely going to get the shot to start immediately. And we see what he brings. But he improved second half of the season. Still think there's a lot of holes in his game overall, and I don't view him as a high upside or super high upside long-term player. But there were some definitely positive improvements from Jovic last season. We'll talk more about him a little bit later on. If we look at the rotation risks of what can change, we've already discussed quite a few of them so far for Miami, but what if Spoelstra does put Bam Adebayo at power forward? Again, I don't really think that this is a significant likelihood to happen, but if Bam goes to power forward, then Jovic's value is disappeared. Jaquez's upside is limited, but Khalil Ware becomes an unbelievable option. And what we also saw down the stretch, while Jovic was playing more, Bam started to take threes. Now, I don't know how real that is going to be, how much Bam is going to take, or how many threes Bam is going to take, but he went from like a 6% three-point attempt rate to like, I think it was 18% over the last month. That's a big difference. He just started taking more threes. It was a very clear decision to take more threes. Very clear. And how much does that tie in to wanting to play him at the 4? I think you can easily find a way to tie those two things together. Bam shot 8% from 3. 0.8 the year before. He was up to 36 last season. Now, it is still really low volume, but he tripled his attempts. And the second half of the season, that number rose steadily. He started just taking more shots. He is smack bang at his prime Bam. He is 6'9". He's a very good defender who doesn't generate big defensive stats. 1.1 steals and 0.9 blocks is not very good for an elite defender. The percentages are fine, 52 from the field, but that's not 60. 76 from the line is below average, and he's had some real fluctuations in that. His assist numbers, which used to be really high before Kyle Lowry arrived and have never recovered, they're not that good. And he's 19 points. He's turned from a lower offensive guy who was a passer and strong defender to a usage center who lacks in some of the other areas. Now, he had 24 usage last season, the same as Jim Butler. He played 34 minutes, Bam. So these are all interesting things. But I look at that and go, is there a new step? Is there a next step for Bam? And I'm not really sure I get there. The threes might be interesting, but then that takes away his field goal percentage. And that probably ends up hurting more than it helps. And him as a third-round player in fantasy, I think feels about right. A risk there is something I talked about already. Like, we hear the myth, and yes, it's a myth, of playoff Jimmy. What if we get regular season Jimmy? Motivated by spite, which is always a great thing when you go in there and, you're fighting against your organization and your teammates in order to prove a point. That's always a recipe for success. Does Jimmy turn it up, become better in the regular season? It's really hard to do that when you're 35. So I'm going to say no, but maybe. The other thing is the backcourt. I assume that Rozier and Hero will start, but they are both not good defenders. They both probably are better suited to being your sixth men. Tyler Hero, he's weirdly rated at sometimes. He puts up awesome numbers, but teams never value him, never want him. He won't come off the bench. His numbers as a starter are better, but the team always had more success when he was... There's a whole bunch of weird things about him. But then I guess the question is, who would you start? Well, I guess you'd start Jaquez in that spot and bring one of Hero or Rozier off the bench. But I don't think that'll happen. But it's one of those ones that I'm not going to fully be able to sit here and rule that out completely. Injury concerns. That could be a large list on this team. Oh, actually, you know what? I did it again. I did this on the earlier show. I'm not doing injury concerns. we're going to come back because we're going to put Terry Rozier under the lens. We'll get to that in a sec. Today's episode is brought to you by the Game Time app. Game Time, the innovators of tickets. They didn't invent tickets, but they're innovating the game. There's always a new thing over on Game Time. One of the new things they got there is Game Time Picks, filtering out the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats. So you don't have to waste your time searching through all of the different offering, the thousands of tickets that are there on Game Time. They've got the curated deals. Like, that's what it is. You say, I'm going to this event, and there might be so many tickets to it, and they just say, well, look, just take a look at these ones first, Josh. We're going to have the best offers for you here, and you get in there. You've also got the all-in pricing you can toggle on. They've got the game time guarantee as well. The lowest price guarantee. Because if you find the ticket, same ticket, for a lower price, well, you get 110% of the difference back in credit from Game Time. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create the account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, sorry, I hit the microphone then when that ad was coming up. I hope you didn't. I'm sure you heard it, but apologies. That's what it was that happened. We're going under the lens. We are talking about Terry Rozier, or as Americans would call him, Scary Terry, or Scary Terry. But the Scary Terry nickname makes no sense in my accent. That's why I never say it. It sounded stupid, didn't it? Scary Terry. Doesn't sound right. Doesn't matter. But this sounds right because we're talking about his production. Rozier traded from Charlotte mid-season, and I don't know what I was going to, how I'd exactly phrase this. Like, when I think about Rozier, which I don't do that often, thankfully for him, I think that he played 20 games for Miami, and most of the season was in Charlotte, but it wasn't true. He basically 50-50'd it, split down the middle. So when we look at his numbers, there's some of it which was in Charlotte where he was the number one guy and LaMelo Ball was out and Brandon Miller hasn't ascended and Miles Bridges missed games for suspension. Then there's the second half where he's in Miami. And then he got hurt with a neck issue. So he is a little bit all over the place. There are a lot of reds on this graph for his defense because he is bad at it. He doesn't foul, but he doesn't do anything else. He doesn't protect the rim very obviously, but he doesn't generate steals. He doesn't deflect. His three-point attempt rate is not very high. His free throw attempt rate is low. His shooting is pretty good, but it does go up and down. He had a pretty sizable offensive load and creation, but most of that came from his time in Charlotte. And you can see that graph there. It's a nice little V shape of his most popular play types. It's almost 30% as a spot-up guy and almost 30% as a pick-and-roll ball handler. I don't know how much pick-and-roll ball handling he's going to do on a team with Hero, Butler, and even Bam Adebayo. So is Rozier going to transition more into a spot-up guy with a little bit of ISO and a little bit of pick-and-roll? Because I don't think he's going to be able to do an even split the way that he did last season. Because again, that was half split between the two teams. Rozier's full season numbers, he's 31 now. He's very undersized. He's 6'1". He had 25 usage overall. 20 points, 4 rebounds, 5.5 assists with a steal, 44 and 87. They're all pretty strong numbers. But again, context is important. We cannot sit here, and people will. There will be people who will sit here and tell you and talk about, and people who draft and talk about fantasy, whatever they'll say. And I'll say, well, I don't know why Rozier is going here. Look what he did last season. I'd love to get 20 and 4 with 5.5 assists on 44 and 87. He's a top 50 player. Right? But that eliminates a million parts of context. Because that was fine. He was like a top 45 player in Charlotte, and he was barely, I don't even think he was a top 100 guy during the time in Miami. And guess where he is this season? He is not in Charlotte. So there have to be some concerns with that. The graph on the right there is Terry Rozier's Darko D DPM, so defensive Darko plus minus. Because early in his career, Rozier made his name for two things. A very, very strong out-of-position rebounder, which is he does not rebound at all anymore. And a tenacious defender. He went to Charlotte, and he just went, defense, I have never, ever heard of this lady in my life. I have never seen her, and I have definitely not had relations with defense ever. He just said, I'm not doing it. And that has persisted for 5 years now. There's been ups and downs in his defensive Darko, but that tracks. More usage, more on-ball stuff, don't care about defense. And that's where I get to that problem with him and Hero, because Hero can't defend. Rozier decides not to defend. So does Rozier go back? And as you can also see on this graph is that his defensive stuff improved in Miami when the usage went down. So that's interesting to watch as well. The headshot plot on the left has two things. The y-axis is the pickpocket rating. So that is generating on-ball steals. Someone's dribbling it, you take it off them. What percentile is a person in? And on the x-axis, it's the percentage of time that a player spent off-ball last season. So without the ball in their hands. There are 4 players on this list. We have got Terry Rozier. There is Tyler Hero. We have got Devin Vassell. And we've got Bogdan Bogdanovic. I think players who have a level of compatibility, which I'll show you that in a sec. The person who was off ball the most out of that group was Bogdan Bogdanovic, 40% off ball. And that's what happens when you're playing with Trey and DeJounte Murray. The player who had the least time off ball was Rozier, 10%. 10% off ball for Terry Rozier. That is a incredibly small amount. Tyler Hero sits at 21% and Vassell sits at 30%. I would be very, very surprised if we get back to this number or this graph next season and look at it, if someone wants to remind me, Rozier will not be spending 10% of his time off ball. That is going to rise, meaning that his opportunities for scoring, for usage, free throw attempts, field goal attempts, assists is going to drop in Miami. And I would imagine it gets to even out a little bit there where Hero is, and that's still well behind Vassell and Bogdanovic. On the positive side, Rozier's pickpocket rating is way higher than these other guys. Now, we consider Vassell a pretty good defender. Bogdanovic had a really high steals rate last season, even though he's not high in the pickpocket rating. So could Rozier salvage some of his value by focusing more on defense, and that's sort of what we've lent into in talking about him here, working on generating more of these steals, offense and usage and assist drop, but maybe he does more defensively. And we know about steals, say it with me, it is the most variable stat year on year. So that could jump. The most similar players for Rozier in fantasy, based on stat shape, it is Vassell, it's Bogdan Bogdanovic, Malcolm Brogdon. Kevin Porter Jr., an interesting name there. Now, with the news on Kawhi, I don't know whether... I think Kevin Porter is probably going to get a suspension at some point coming up here. But there is possibly more opportunity for him. And I would consider drafting him over like a Batum or a Terrence Mann in 12-team leagues for sure. Over Norman Powell, debatable. But there are going to be a lot of opportunities for ball handling and usage if Kawhi is going to miss time, which I think he pretty obviously is. Be pretty surprised if he didn't, to be honest, at this point. So that's our deep dive on Terry Rozier. Understanding that half of his stuff happened on a completely different team in a completely different situation, which is not replicable this year. Now, we can talk injuries, because there's going to be a lot of them on this team as well. So let's take a look at where the concerns are. One of those is Rozier, who missed down the stretch with a neck problem. We think that's okay. Jimmy Butler's always an injury concern. Everyone's waiting with bated breath. What hair is he going to show up with to media day? Imagine he goes back to old rookie Jimmy Butler, the full buzz cut. Actually, don't care enough to worry about it, even though I spent time on it there. But he's an injury risk for sure. Josh Richardson suffered a torn shoulder the same way that Julius Randle did. Same injury. Now, there is some doubt apparently now that Randle will be ready for opening night, which is a bloody long time for that injury. Richardson should be fine, but his role is limited. And then there's Drew Smith, who I feel like has been on the Heat 17 times. He tore his ACL last season. He's back on another two-way, and hopefully they don't have to be relying upon Drew Smith for minutes this season, but he is returning. Their schedule, there's nothing that really majorly stands out in terms of viewing their schedule. They've got 49 quality games. That's middle of the pack number. They've got 15 back-to-backs. That's on the high side. They've got 14 maximum games weeks. That's in the middle. And their playoff schedule is pretty good. If you finish on March the 23rd, you go 4-4-4. March the 30th, it's 4-4-3. Yahoo default is 4-3-4, and ESPN default is 4-3-4-4. Pretty standard stuff. Nothing that's changing lives or anything along those lines. Let's take a look at the young players on this team. And a number of these guys we have spoken about already. The youth invasion, so to speak. Well, actually, we haven't. We've spoken about one of them, Jovic. And my Bazemore metric did put him as a top 125 guy. Again, I'm not as high on him, but some of the advanced stuff, loved him. His youth and experience are a good combination. There's some good things there. The guy I do really want to focus on here when we're talking youth invasion is Wander Franco. No, that's a different Miami player. Sorry, it is Khalil Ware that we want to talk about in this spot, because he was a guy that I thought should have gone in the lottery. I think the Heat getting him at number 15 was a bit of a steal. I've got him currently as a top 125 player in Dynasty Leagues. Ware is 20. He's 7 foot tall. He played 32 minutes in Indiana after transferring from Oregon. He averaged 16 and 10. He blocked 2 shots a game. He shot 59% from the field, half a 3 a game. He is the perfect guy that the Pelicans should have got if he had fallen to them at 21, which he did not. And I think he will work very, very well with Bam. He is bigger. He protects the rim, which Bam doesn't do, and he shoots. And I think that in the end it will work out pretty well to have Ware and Bam together. I'm not sure it'll happen immediately. But in terms of guys that are inside the top, in terms of Dynasty rookies, like he was 15th, he should go well ahead of that in Dynasty rookie drafts, well ahead. And there is a chance that I haven't finalized my list in terms of the guys that we draft in the final rounds of drafts, the Flyer Zone, the FZ. He's almost definitely going to be on that list because you just never know. Josh Christopher, also an interesting name. He was in the wilderness. He was a first-round pick of the Rockets, was bundled off to the Hawks, and then ended up in Memphis and then was waived. Didn't really play at all last season. And then joined Miami and dominated in their summer league team and signed a 2-way contract. And he is like 2 years younger than Jaime Jaquez. A year younger than Jaime Jaquez. Not that I'm expecting much out of out of Christopher as a 2-way guy, but he intrigued as a player with some passing ability, scoring and shooting, and some decent enough steal numbers at times when he was in Houston. And we never really got to see it happen. If you want a team that's going to try and develop a guy like this is the perfect spot. So I've got Christopher as a top 200 guy despite some failed stints in other spots. I think he also played for the Jazz at one point too. Just a name to not discount, to not completely just forget about. Joshy Christopher as a Dynasty guy who is on a 2-way. There's a little bit of value there in him, I think. The risk versus reward section, it's about where variance strikes and who are the guys that seem to be more susceptible to that. And Jimmy Butler's one of those. Steals, of course, are the big one there. Free throw attempts can be a big one too. Free throw percentage can be a big one. So I've got a category league ranking variance of 80 and a points league variance of 6.5. Throw in the risk with injury and age. It's why I'm not going into round 2 or round 3 for him. But I still think there's value for getting him at 79, which those ESPN ranks would have suggested. Well, not would have suggested, actually did suggest. On the other side of the age spectrum, we're talking guys that are over the hill, the 29-year-old plus guys. One of those is Jim Butler. One of those is Terry Rozier. Another one of those, which I don't think many people would expect, but Duncan Robinson. Duncan Robinson is not that young. And Robinson had a resurgence last season. Old mate Dunk stepped up and played 28 minutes a night. He's 30 years of age. He averaged 13 points with almost 3 threes, but we know the Duncan Robinson story. He will hit threes. He's really good at shooting free throws, but doesn't get many of them. And to be quite fair and honest to him, his passing improved a ton, and he did a lot more that wasn't just shooting threes. 3 assists in 28 minutes for Dunk Robinson is really strong, but the pathway for 28 minutes requires injuries because not only is, theoretically Jimmy Butler doing more, they brought Alec Burks in, and Terry Rozier's got a full season. So I don't see any way that Robinson is even getting 25. Maybe he gets 21 or 22. And then there's Jaime Jaquez coming off the bench who sort of has to battle some of that playing time for Dunk. He's a part of that list. Josh Richardson's on the decline phase side of things also. So is Kevin Love, who somehow is still sticking around. I don't know how that's happening, but he is. Love is now 1 million years old, I think, but maybe not accurate. Oh, no, sorry, it's been told it's 36. He played just 17 minutes a night, 21 usage. Does he even top 50 games this season? That's, again, doubtful with Ware around. Tom Bryant back. Look, he does not need to play every game. 9.6 rebounds, 2 assists, 44 and 79. Kevin Love's career is winding down. His effectiveness has obviously dipped significantly, but he is still on this roster. He's still on the roster. And the other one is their new signing for this upcoming season. And that is Pistons legend, two-time New York Knicks legend, Alec Burks, who is the only move this team made outside of drafting. Burks is 33. He's a combo guard. He played 18 minutes with 24 usage. He had 10 and 2 with 2 threes. We know what Burks is. He's usually a pretty good three-point shooter, although his overall field goals were down 37. He can handle the ball. My thing with him is like, okay, so you got another Tyler Hero and Terry Rozier. What do we do with that? I don't think there's any point in splitting up Rozier and Hero so Burks could start, because it's just the same stuff but worse. So that's why if they are going to break that up, I'd expect it to be maybe it's a Josh Richardson. Maybe it is a Jaime Jaquez who steps into that role. I've mentioned Hero a couple of times already, but we haven't really dug into his game all that much. Let's just do that a little bit now. Because Hero's a guy, again, people love to hate him. He's 25, so he still hasn't fully hit his prime. He's 6'5", he's decent sized. 34 minutes, 27 usage, 21 points, over 3 threes, 5 rebounds, 4.5 assists, 44 and 86. We know he's not going to get steals. We know he's going to be a field goal drain. And the 4.5 assists could easily come down with a full season of Rozier there. So while he's a 20-point per game scorer, and that used to be something that people really frothed a lot, they don't as much anymore, Hero still remains pretty much appropriately ranked. I think he's at 76 on Yahoo ADP. That might be marginally high, but I'm not going to hate on that. For points leagues, it's okay in that area as well. But we have to look at some of his numbers and go, there is a chance that some of those assist totals, and even maybe the usage, but probably not, maybe that drops. And we hear his name every 5 minutes, and he'll be a part of a matching salary in a trade somewhere. It never happens, of course, but we do hear it a lot. The guy I haven't spoken about is someone they brought back in free agency. It is Haywood Highsmith, who is a really good defender for his position. He's a 3-4, played a lot of 4. He's only 6'5", half a block, 0.8 steals in his 21 minutes. Like, he can't really shoot or do anything else. But there's a chance that he gets some of those Jovic minutes and plays because of his defensive acumen. And maybe they make him the new Caleb Martin. But we don't want anything to do with him realistically from any sort of standard fantasy perspective. So that's the Heat. When we're talking about the value of these guys, I don't think there's anybody from Miami you want to look at in the top 2 rounds. You look at Bam in 3 or 4. Bam's better in categories than in points, but he's actually getting that gap's closing. Jim Butler, you want around the 4th round, I would guess, given the concerns about his game and the steals and his age. Heroes in the 80s, maybe 90s. Rozier's in around the 100s. I wouldn't want to go too much higher than that. I think the risk associated with him is real, and the usage drop-off and assist rate drop-off in Miami versus Charlotte is there too. And then you're talking later round guys. There's 3 guys I like. It's Jovic, it's Jaquez, and it's Ware. Now, they're not all going to hit, but one of them could. And I think they're all in that mix to be a pick in those later rounds. Guys, don't forget to hit the YouTube subscribe button. Don't forget to leave your comments down below. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.